Happy Halloween! Let's dive into a treat of Week 9 DFS football. We have a couple of free contests running this weekend, which should be more treats than tricks, hopefully. Let's kick off by checking out what we did last week and then talking about the games this week and building some lineups. How'd we do last week?
So last week went well. It went very well. So we won $7. This was the lineup that we built on the podcast with 150 points. You can see what the winning was here at 205. I also made a couple variations of this that did slightly better. I got up to 170 points on one of my variations where I brought in Cedric Tillman instead of Jackson Smith-Njigba in here. So that got a little bit better. There were lots of quarterbacks that kind of took you there. So Kirk Cousins worked, Baker Mayfield worked, Brock Purdy worked, Bo Nix worked. I also had a Bo Nix stack that did just under this one. So there were lots of ways to get there with quarterback. I think the downfall came with wide receivers. We only had 6 wide receivers, I believe, that were above 20 points. So you didn't have a lot that you were picking from on those wide receivers. You kind of had to hit it, and you really needed CeeDee Lamb and Cedric Tillman to be in your lineup as well. Devon Achane was a great running back option. I'm sure that both of the Detroit running backs could have been in your lineup as well and done well.
We got to celebrate National Tight Ends Day with the rest of the field with Kate Otten. And it's interesting, the winning lineup bringing in a second tight end as well for National Tight Ends Day last week.
That doesn't usually work out well, bringing in a second tight end, especially in FanDuel. But in this case, it did on last weekend. They all hit. So are they all going to be off this week and no tight ends are scoring? We'll see.
Let's jump into this week's games then and kick it off with Dallas at Atlanta. Atlanta's favored by 2.5 with an over-under of 51.5. Is this really going to be that high scoring?
CeeDee Lamb had 17 targets last week. They finally used CeeDee Lamb.
It was the recipe of what worked for them last year. Come out of that bye week and just hyper-target CeeDee Lamb. Just remember, you got few skill positions that actually make a difference, so might as well just make the most out of the highest paid receiver on the field and target him over and over again. My initial impression is I kind of like the under in this one. 51.5 seems high. What are your thoughts?
You know, I'm never good at predicting what Atlanta's going to do. If I think they have defense, then they let Tampa Bay rack up 30 points on you. If I think they don't have a defense, then, you know, it ends up being a low-scoring game. I think if the Cowboys come out and throw at CeeDee Lamb 17 times again, that they can get to 51 points. And then on the Falcons side, I don't like picking the Falcons players because they like to spread it around. So I believe we had Drake London last week, and it was Darnell Mooney that was Kirk Cousins' favorite, along with Kyle Pitts. So where it's going to go on the Falcons side, I don't like predicting, and so I'm kind of out on that side.
I think if I have to choose one, I'm going to go back to London. He did have a down week last week, but that's because Kyle Pitts stole the touchdowns, and he really should have probably just had one of them, but he got the second one in there too. And London really just didn't have an opportunity to do much. The drives were just over off of those couple big plays. So he has been the number one target for Cousins, and I like going back to them in the spot if Dallas can keep pace with them. But I think, if they're going to keep pace, then CeeDee Lamb and London would correlate well together. But I don't think I'm in on either of the quarterbacks on this game.
Yeah, I don't love the quarterbacks here either. This is kind of a week where I may be, running that quarterback without any correlation there. I have a lot of quarterbacks that I like.
I think in general, my approach for this game, I don't really like stacking it too much. I'm more just looking to get that one piece and get out of this.
Yeah, I like CeeDee Lamb just because who else are they going to throw it to?
But is he going to be worth that then? Yeah, 9,100 that he's priced at currently.
Yeah, last week he had 36 points. We honestly would need him to do more than that to pay off at 9,100. And I don't know when you start talking that way if he can do that.
Well, let's move on to Miami at Buffalo. Buffalo's favored by 6.5. I think that kind of makes sense with just past performance, but I mean, this is a rematch that took Tua out earlier this year. Is Tua going to make it through this game again? Do we think it's going to be that off where Buffalo is so dominating?
So I don't know your impressions about Miami last week, but I thought they actually looked like a competent team, like an NFL team again, but it wasn't that same level of Miami that we're used to. We haven't seen those big plays. We haven't seen those big bombs to Tyreek yet. They haven't just been running all over the field like they were at the beginning of last year. And Buffalo's defense has really shown up more at own, and Josh Allen has kind of owned Miami. So the 6.5 point spread makes sense to me, but this is another one that you can call your shot, like projections wise. You're going to have a lot of red on your defensive matchups for this game, but then it's Miami and Buffalo. Like, it's going to be exciting. We know it has the potential to have those fireworks and have all the pieces come in. So there's a couple dart throws if you want to go Shakir or Coleman. I'm with that. And then I think I'm leaning Achane for the Miami side. But besides that, I'm actually kind of down on the Miami receivers for this game.
That's good to hear. I thought you were going to try to sell me again on Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle like last week, and I didn't think I was really ready to buy into either one of them again this week.
Yeah,
Plus,
we got the 1 week discount on them, but I don't know why they already got jacked up this week.
I don't either. Yeah, Tyreek Hill was 7,900 last week, and he scored 10 fantasy points, and they bumped him up to 8,500. So yeah, I'm not in on the Dolphins receivers. I could buy into Waddle if you wanted to take a shot in the dark on a tournament lineup. Waddle at 6,200 does make me interested, because if this gets competitive, he could have a big game.
See, I'm viewing Achane more in that kind of dump off role. Like, even outside of, we know Buffalo's been giving it up to running backs on the ground, but in just the receiving role, Achane's on pace to be a 1,000-yard receiver this season on his games
and
with Tua. So
he's going to have to be, I think, because he's got Mostert stealing his touchdowns at the very end. So he's going to have to carry those passing plays with him. What do you think about James Cook?
I think I'm a little biased. That Thursday night game or that primetime game really sticks out when these two teams played last, and Cook just dominating them in that first half. So both running backs are of interest. I think they would ultimately like to lean on Cook if they have, and Ray Davis has also looked good to kind of spill Cook. I'm not too worried about Ray Davis stealing touchdowns on the goal line, but I do like Cook. I think he kind of gets overshadowed by some of the other running backs on the slate, but he's a good pivot point if you want to get different than the field.
I agree. It is interesting that we talk a lot more about Devon Achane than James Cook, and they're priced the same.
Yeah.
It is hard for me to think I'm going to go with James Cook over Devon Achane, but in this game, I think he could be better.
He just seems so exciting, and you know that he has potential to house every single play. And I think with Cook, it's too ambiguous for Buffalo. Like, with Cooper there, Shakir, Coleman, and Cook, it's hard to, and then Allen always running for touchdowns as well. It's hard to pinpoint, take your shot.
Well, then let's move on to talk about the LA Rams at Seattle. LA is favored, but only barely, and it's at Seattle.
Do we have a health status for Gino? DK? Last I saw, he was questionable.
I'm hearing it's looking like he is not playing.
Okay.
So to me, if we don't have DK Metcalf, that whole Seahawks offense was shut down without Metcalf. It did not look good. And I know the Buffalo's playing pretty well right now, but they still just didn't look like they could get anything going, especially the running game, without that threat of DK Metcalf. And I expect the Rams to pretty much come in and do the same. I love the Rams side of this. So this is one that I could definitely be talked into stacking. I could go with Matthew Stafford here and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, but they're kind of pricey. Puka's 81 and Cooper Kupp is 82. And Sometimes we see both, but sometimes we only see one or the other. I want to think they can keep this competitive and that they need to pass.
Yeah, I like
You
that
think they
Seattle's at
can?
home in this. I think they
Yeah.
can keep up. It does really change my outlook on this entire offense of having DK Metcalf available. I think he's really one of the engines that keeps it running. But their other engine, Kenneth Walker, I think he is kind of set up for the great game. The Rams have been kind of hit or miss against running backs this season, and I think definitely at home they're going to have to lean on him. If it is a competitive game and we get that shootout, I think he's going to need 2 touchdowns, and then you're going to have the Rams side where you can double stack with Puka and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I like this game to go on the over and get a little out of hand just because both teams have ways to do that. It's really
Yeah, there's
dependent
not a lot of
on
clean stacks this week, and I think this is one of the better ones on the Rams side. With Stafford, you really need him to kind of hit his ceiling to pay off his salary, as just he's not going to get any rushing yards or anything on the ground to kind of give you that boost. So he has to be like a 350-yard passer and probably 3 touchdowns to show up in a tournament.
Yeah.
But the other extreme dart throw I have for this is Blake Corum. He's the backup running back behind Kyren, and he's gotten some red zone work, but really, I don't like betting on injuries in general, but Kyren's workload just doesn't seem sustainable. He's out there every single down, and that normally just doesn't work out. We always see running backs miss games. If your name's not Derrick Henry, you can't really sustain this workload. So I hope he is. He's been electric, and I think if he plays the whole game, there's potential that I think he'll show up and probably be one of the most rostered running backs. So even if he's out there, if Corum steals a touchdown near the goal line, he might just pay off his price.
I can't say that I like him.
Yeah, a dart throw.
That's, yeah. A dart throw where you're blindfolded too.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to Detroit at Green Bay. Detroit is favored. Over-under is 48. Is Jordan Love going to play this week?
I don't think so.
I think we have opposite takes on this. The only reason I think he is because the spread's only 3 points.
Yeah, but I heard if he was playing, this would be a pick'em game.
What do you mean by that? What's a pick'em game?
Nobody's favored. So
I can't say that Green Bay is scraping by against Jacksonville versus the Lions, doing whatever they want the past 3 weeks, that I would think it would be a pick'em game with Love. They must really respect the Packers here at home.
They do. And that Green Bay at home gets a lot of weight. But I just don't expect that we see Jordan Love play in this game. If we do see Jordan Love start, which maybe we will, he doesn't finish it. It's going to be like last week. And he's going to go out mid-game. And this is not an injury that I'm willing to take a risk of stacking up, especially the way Detroit's playing right now.
I think
they played Tennessee. I may be reading too much into that.
And it was a weird game script for Tennessee. They scored, however, they had David Montgomery throwing it. They got a special teams touchdown. They almost had more points than Goff had throwing yards last week. Yeah. So that was incredible to see. But we're also, one thing I've noticed is we're not seeing a lot of Lions show up in these winning lineups. They're doing enough to be great fantasy options, but they already cost so much and they spread the ball around. They have so many options on that offense that none of them are really having those week winning performances that show up in these tournament lineups.
That's true. We're not seeing that. I think at most we see Gibbs and Montgomery show up, and some of them with their 20 points that they're almost routinely getting. But other than that, we don't see a lot of it. I do like Amon-Ra with Jameson Williams with the suspension out again. I do like Amon-Ra again a little bit more, but it's not my favorite game.
He's a safer play. The only one I'm going to be monitoring the Love news, and I think if Love is in, then Detroit has been given up in the air. So, I mean, Calvin Ridley was a great play last week against them. And I think Reed is kind of that same type of receiver. So if Love is in, then I'd be willing to go back to Reed.
If Love is out,
If
you're
Love
just
is
gonna
out,
stay away.
I'm out of this game. I'm
'Cause
moving on to
Malik
better
Willis
options.
is going to be running. Maybe the run game gets a little bit more involved for Green Bay with Willis in there. Not my
Well, and
favorite.
Potentially being out of this game, let's move on to the Raiders at Cincinnati. I'm not sure you're picking up too many I'm not sure you're picking up too many Raiders players, except maybe Brock Bowers for your tight end. But anyone on the Cincinnati side you like?
So this is another one that doesn't excite me. Jamar Chase is 9,500. He hasn't shown that he can do anything like that this year. Now we have T. Higgins injured again and trending towards not playing. And we know that with T. Higgins not in that game, that nothing seems to go right on the Bengals offense. So I don't like this one at all.
One thing that I will point out is with the Higgins injury, when he was out the first few weeks of the season, we were getting a lot of targets to the tight end position. Gesicki was a crucial element of that passing offense with Higgins out, and he has a cheaper price, so I don't really like paying up for tight ends. He's definitely an option that has come up in a lot of my lineups just because I think he'll be more involved with Higgins out. The only other play that I'll bring up, I'm completely off of the Raiders side, is Chase Brown. With wanting to pay up at other places, he's a cheap option, and a favored running back at home is typically a good bet. He's been the more explosive of the backs, and he's been getting a larger workload as the season has progressed, but hasn't really had a breakout game yet.
Yeah. I'd just stay away from this game.
Well, then let's chat Indy at Minnesota. Minnesota's favored. Over-under is 47.
This is my favorite game of the week. This is the game I want to commit to.
Is that what everyone's going to say? Or is it just because, we're Colts fans and Flacco's in there that we're going in on this one?
I think it's because, maybe it's I've watched too much Colts football and I've watched every single team break tackles and be wide open against our defense. But it's hard not to be excited of the best NFL receiver against one of the worst defenses. And then the Colts on the other side, they're averaging 27 points with Joe Flacco. Minnesota has not been a great defense. So I think they both set up well to get that full shootout potential in this game.
I agree. I'm actually a little surprised this one isn't over the 50 mark. And at 47, I really like it. I should probably go bet it. The problem comes in on, Colts wide receivers. Which one are you going to pick? It's
both.
Either or both. Yeah, they're cheap, so you can pick them all. And again, like I said, Flacco is one of the quarterbacks at 7,000 that I think can hit that 300 yards in passing. And I think if they're even, remotely in this, if they're within that 5.5 point spread, then he will hit that 300-yard game.
Yeah. I think my lean is Pittman over Downs, strictly from a price perspective. They project pretty similarly. I think their talent is pretty comparable, and how they're used and what role they play in that offense is pretty comparable. So you're getting $1,100 savings going to Pittman at $5,800 versus Downs at $6,900. So that would just be my lean. Very easy to double stack them and pay up and get Saquon in your other positions, or pay up for your running back.
How about paying up for Justin Jefferson?
I like it. I mean, if there's anyone on the slate that has the potential to get that 40-point game, I think it's Jefferson this week. So he would be my pick of kind of that top tier receiver that you're paying up for. It should be exciting. If you want to fade him, I really like Aaron Jones.
I could argue that too. And then if you want to look at somebody that's probably not going to be played very much, that would be TJ Hawkinson. Looks to be back this week for the Vikings at tight end. So with Hawkinson coming back, they may try to, immediately get him somewhat involved in their passing attack again. And the Colts are a great team to try to do that against. And he may be limited on plays, but they will be good plays if he gets them. So I like
Yeah,
the Hawkinson angle on this, that he's a cheap tight end that has a huge upside, in my opinion.
I agree. And kind of going back to last week, I mean, the team was talking about playing him last week, and that was
Yeah.
the Thursday night game. So he's had that additional days of rest. So they're coming off 10 days of rest, and he is fully recovered. The team took no chances to get him fully back healthy, and he
Yep.
should be good to go. So I imagine they'll have some plays schemed up for him. They're looking forward to him being back in the offense and seeing what he can provide. So I think he's a great price point too, at just 6,000.
Well, let's move on to Jacksonville at Philadelphia. Philadelphia is favored by 8. Over-under still within our limits of 45.5. Anyone you want from this game? You grabbing this game or avoiding it?
I want an
It's-
Eagle in my
You
lineup.
want an Eagle.
Yeah. We got Jacksonville's defense has just looked terrible for the past 7 weeks, I would say. And Saquon is in a good spot here. He is the most expensive running back on the slate at 94, but he is really just set up to crush the I lean him over paying up for Hurts. They are all expensive options for the Eagles, but Hurts, I think, has gotten kind of lucky that the Eagles offense just happens to go down at the 1 yard line 3 times last week, and he got his 3 rushing touchdowns. So I think that'll kind of balance back out and say they go down at the 5 yard line. And now that's more outside zone runs for Barkley.
Yeah, the only way I can get to paying up for Saquon Barkley in this, because he's going to have to hit 40, is thinking that they take the ball on the 25 and he literally breaks a 75-yard run 2 or 3 times for touchdowns. And that's what he's going to have to do, because this isn't going to be a grinded out game. He'll just be having big breakaways, and then they could not play him in the fourth quarter because they're so far ahead.
Yeah, I think this Eagles offense is kind of rounding into form. We saw Devontae Smith have a big game last week. Jalen Hurts came through. I think we're going to see some highlight plays. It's just hard to pin down who it's going to be. I would lean off of Devontae Smith, really just because he got it last week, and I think it'll balance out to Brown or Saquon.
Well, let's chat Denver at Baltimore. Baltimore's favored by 9.5 points. Over-under is 45.5. How's this game going to go? Do you believe the over-under here?
There's some concern that Lamar Jackson is injured. So he hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday, they just said it was a rest day, but then he didn't practice on Thursday too, and no one's really addressed that. He supposedly has a back and a knee injury. I don't know how Lamar doesn't practice, but Lamar didn't look like Lamar last week in that Cleveland game either. I know his wide receivers were dropping passes, but he just didn't seem like Lamar to me. So I have some concern there. I don't see any way they don't win this, but 9.5 points is a lot. And I don't know that. I'm definitely not paying up for Jackson. Jackson's got to be in the game for Henry to do well.
I agree. I think Henry does well when this entire offense is rolling. So if Lamar Jackson's there, if they're crushing them, then I don't see how Henry doesn't have a great game. But other than that, we're going to have to monitor the injury. Do you like anyone on the Denver side coming back?
I don't. I think after that loss last week, the Ravens are going to be playing some really, really good defense. I feel like normally I'd love the Broncos, but I feel like they're hitting the Ravens right at the wrong time. So this situation in Baltimore just makes me totally off of the Bronco players.
I agree. I think Denver has gotten some fortunate matchups the last couple weeks, and I think this is kind of where they come back to earth, and the Ravens defense reminds them that he's a rookie quarterback and probably gets a couple turnovers on Bo Nix. So I like Henry. as long as Jackson plays. Outside of that, I think I'm pretty much out of the rest of the options here. It'll be interesting to monitor how they incorporate Deontay Johnson, since I think he plays kind of a similar role to Zay Flowers. So it's going to be interesting kind of how that target share balances out.
Yep.
Would you pick up the Ravens defense?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
They're going to be
At
pricey,
home.
though.
Well, let's move on to Chicago at Arizona. Arizona's only favored by 1. It's a 44.5 game. We are now below that 45 mark for our games.
I don't like Arizona to be able to keep this close. The Bears defense should be super motivated after that embarrassing Hail Mary loss to Washington last week. So I can just see the defense scoring all the points in this matchup. And I don't
Yeah, I
know
don't
that
think they're gonna
Arizona
be
can do anything.
chirping the crowd too much in this one. I think
Yeah,
they're going to
no.
be pretty focused and shutting them down. It is interesting way to play something that the field's not going to play. I think that's kind of where Marvin Harrison has shined so far this season is as soon as the field goes away from him, he has great games and he reminds people why he was that number 1 receiver taken. But in this spot, I don't think I can spend the money to afford him when there's so many other good options on the slate.
Yeah, this is another one where, just like in the Ravens matchup with that, the team is just playing them at the wrong time. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, the Bears coming off of that embarrassing loss are going to look to pick that up a bit.
Well, then let's move on to Washington at the New York Giants. Washington's favored by 3.5. We going to get another Hail Mary pass, or I think there's a couple of injuries here to consider.
There are some injuries. I mean, we're all still looking at Jaden Daniels, but he played last week. He'll play this week. It's obviously just pain that he's playing with, and he could still chuck that ball, so it's not affecting him too bad like we saw with that Hail Mary. I don't look for this to be competitive. The Washington defense is playing well. The Giants don't look good. Maybe you could talk me into Malik Neighbors, but he's too pricey. I think one of the cheaper options that I'm definitely interested in, and I may be interested either way in this, is Austin Eckler, the running back for the Commanders at 5,500. Brian Robertson Jr. looks like he may be out with a hamstring injury, and he hasn't been practicing. If he's out, I do love the cheap Austin Eckler play at 5,500.
Yeah, he would definitely be interesting. I think there's a couple players that are kind of getting lost in the shuffle for the slate. That Malik Neighbors, I mean, he's been exceptional this season, and I don't think he's really going to get played much. He's kind of in that weird price range where the other options are just more attractive, but Malik Neighbors has dominated, and the Giants really aren't a great defense. Or Washington is not really a good secondary. So I can see Daniel Jones trying to keep his job and just feeding him 15 targets and seeing what he can do. But I think besides that,
running backs
not too
on for the Giants also, Tyrone Tracy is probably out. He got a concussion in the last game. That puts it all on Devin Singletary, which is kind of an interesting play as well. I always like it when I can get one running back instead of sharing two of them.
I agree. I think it's hard for me to take the underdog running back in this spot because, I mean, there's a chance Washington blows them out and Daniel Jones is trying to keep his job and just pass into Wandale and Malik Neighbors. So I think I'd be off of Singletary. I think there's some other cheaper plays for running back.
Well, speaking of teams with well-known running backs, New Orleans at Carolina. New Orleans is favored by 7.5 points. Over-under is 43. Is Carr playing? How is this going to work out? New Orleans has been struggling, but so has Carolina.
I think we see Carr play.
Is he's in?
Yeah, I think he's in.
Yeah, he would be really key for this game doing anything. I think if we had Bryce Young versus Spencer Rattler, you move on. You don't turn that on your TV. You don't suffer through that. But really, it's both these both these defenses are terrible, and these offenses haven't been functioning. So it's like, what's going to give? Are these defenses bad enough to actually make the other offenses look capable, or is this just going to be a dud of a game, and no one can really pay off their price?
I kind of actually like this game. I know. This is one of those games where you're like, I should have known not to have done this, but I'm very interested in this game and think it could easily go kind of crazy. I think Kamara could have a great game. I know we've talked like a lot about the obvious Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley, but I think Alvin Kamara is set up for a great game. But he's pricey too at 8,800. What do you think about Kamara?
Kamara, I think I'm going to stay out of. I tend to think that this game is just not going to do much. I'm more looking at the other side for Chuba Hubbard, but really only if he has that backfield to himself.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like he's going to.
If Brooks is on track to play, that's going to be something to monitor if they're activating him. But really the past 3 weeks, it's kind of been a dual threat with Deontay Johnson and Chuba Hubbard. And they've just been feeding everything through them. So now with Johnson shipped out, Chuba is in line for a crazy workload if he's the only person there. So I think he could pay off his price and be interesting. Other than that, I think I'm fine with either defense. Carolina is one of the cheapest defenses. And if you're leaning on the side that this game is just going to flop and these are two awful teams, I think they can get 5 points and you move on at a cheap price.
Well, let's move on to the LA Chargers at Cleveland Browns. LA Chargers are only favored by 1, and which after last week's performance, that was a very different Cleveland Browns than we've been seeing so far this year.
Yeah, they did get a price upgrade too in accordance. So like we were saying, like Cedric Tillman was a great play last week. He's still an interesting play, but much higher price this week after his breakout. Who do you like in this game?
I think this is the dud game where we all, we got all excited last week about Jameis Winston coming back in, and he threw the ball and somehow he miraculously didn't throw 3 interceptions that the Ravens should have had. I think he comes back to earth in this game, but
you think that balances out and he gets his 3 interceptions this game to get the 3-3?
I think so. I definitely think that's possible. I still like Cedric Tillman in this game. I mean, the Browns have shown us they're going to throw it up. They're going to let Winston throw it 40 times. And they're not going to make Nick Chubb run it 40 times. And they've got other injuries at running back. So we know that Jameis Winston's going to throw it. I love Cedric Tillman. I love Njoku. I don't know how successful they will be because the Chargers are playing decent defense.
Yeah. And Herbert has actually been playing pretty well recently, and they've been letting him throw it. But who's he going to throw to? The injuries on that side, you got McConkey with a hip injury, you got Disley with a shoulder injury, and then Quinten Johnston's still trying to get back to the field too. So are they going to have anyone available for that? It wasn't a great receiving core to start with, and now it's significantly injured. I think if you get McConkey by himself with Disley out and Quinten Johnston out, then at 6,400, he would be a good option. But other than that, I think it's hard to trust anyone on that Charger side.
Yeah, and Cleveland, the defense over there has been playing well as also. So I just think this is our dud.
Well, and let's wrap this up then with the New England Patriots at Tennessee. Tennessee's favored by 3.5 points. This is below our 40 over-under limit at 38.5. I'm surprised that this wasn't everyone's dud for the week and the one before was, but what do y'all think here? Is this another one just to avoid?
Yeah, this one you avoid. Drake May's not in there. He's got a concussion. He's probably going to be out, which I just don't like anyone here.
I think the only one that I'm willing to play is Tony Pollard. He's been pretty good on this season. Tennessee's not going to be favored in a lot of games, and this is one of those positions where he's favored at home. So should get a good workload, and he's looked good. So I'm willing to go back to Tony Pollard here, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm not willing to do that, so we're going to have to find somebody else.
Well, that's a good segue. So let's start building our lineups. I didn't hear too many stacking options this week. What do y'all think? Were there any stacking options you really want to base off of?
There's only 2 games that I've really gone for stacking this week, and that's been the Rams-Seahawks game and then the Colts-Minnesota game.
I can do that. Those are the 2 that I have on my list as well. So you want to do Stafford? Are you
Let's
like
do
Sam
Stafford.
Darnold? Or are you like Joe Flacco? I like Stafford, I think.
I think as Colts fans, let's go away from them and try to shape it up with the Rams-Seahawks game.
All right. We're going to go Matthew Stafford. You want to do both Puka and Cooper Kupp? Or are we going to try to narrow this down so we can afford somebody else?
I think I'm willing to take one of them and then maybe even Demarcus Robinson as a cheap play and pay up elsewhere. Or do you think it's really just going to get funneled back to the main 2? We saw Robinson
like
get the 2 touchdowns last week, but I mean, those were kind of random plays.
Yeah,
If he
I don't
doesn't
think
get that
that
he does
happens
nothing.
again. All things go back to average, and I'm going to go with that. So let's just keep it simple and see what else we can do, because I know there's some other options, especially over here at running back, that I think we do want to pay up for. If I'm looking at cheap, I have a list of cheap running backs if we need somebody. Like I said, Austin Eckler at 5,500. I do like him in that game against the Giants if we're looking to save. But we've talked about some expensive options. So Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Justin Jefferson, even CeeDee Lamb or Malik Neighbors. Who should we pay for?
I think if we're going with the Rams stack, I would bring back with Kenneth Walker and kind of lock him in. If this game is going to pop off, then I think he has to play a vital role for that Seahawks team.
I don't like it.
I'm just going to say 2 weeks ago, we did get a text from you saying you should have bought in on the Seahawks game with us.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go on record. I'm not liking that. So.
Well, we got the majority. We're locking in Kenneth Walker at 8,000.
Can't believe we're spending 8,000 for somebody who had like 3 points last week.
All right. Where do we want to go next? I think in typical, when I've been building lineups, I've been keeping tight end cheap and trying to leave money at pay up for one of those elite wide receivers or elite running backs. You can't really afford to do both, I don't think, with how we've kind of set up this lineup.
I agree.
What about Hawkinson? We were talking about. Yeah.
I do like Hawkinson down here at 5,600. I think he's a great bargain. I can also go Taysom Hill, and if we want to pay a little bit more, then I would go Kyle Pitts. But I do like taking that risk on Hawkinson at 5,600, assuming
Can I interest you in further down with Gesicki? How much is the savings between him and Hawkinson?
It's
just a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So I think Hawkinson would be the better value there.
He is definitely the better tight end, in my opinion.
I agree.
We've stacked from the Rams Seattle game with Stafford, Walker, and Nakua. We've grabbed Hawkinson for our tight end in the Indy Minnesota game. We now need a running back, 2 wide receivers, a flex, and a defense.
I think my number one receiver for the slate is Pittman. I think at 5,800, there really just isn't a receiver that's around that price range that has his usage and his talent. And he's a good way to save and get consistent work that is going to be there with Flacco. I mean, they've been letting Flacco air it out when he's been there. And if we have Hawkinson there, I think that'd be a good kind of mini stack for that game.
We're jumping into who we want to save with. Is there someone that we want to make sure we have enough money for on the other side?
I think that's the problem, is there's a lot of good pay up options. So I was kind of seeing how much we had left.
Okay.
I'm not in love with Pittman.
Do you like Downs better or just off those wide receivers?
I just stay away from those wide receivers. It is literally like picking a Green Bay wide receiver, and every week it just burns me. So it is not a wide receiver core that I would ever pick from. I would be
think
much happier going Keon Coleman or Cedric Tillman.
the
One
only
that
reason I lean Pittman is the 3 games with Flacco, he's been averaging 15 points and seeing consistent targets. That's
his back injury, I feel like is a bigger influence on his play than we have probably given it credit.
well, we can take him out of there. I'm fine going
We
in another
can
direction.
leave him for now, but I'm just going on that this is not what I love. All right, are we going to pay for a running back, or are we going to go cheap?
So we
And if we're
have
paying,
about 6,000 left per player, but we can save on defense, so we've got more than enough to pay out for one of these top options. I think Kyron is kind of ruled out if we're going with Stafford. I think if Stafford is going to pay off, then he has to have that 3 touchdown, and Kyron can't be getting double touchdowns to pay off his price.
I wouldn't agree with that, but
You think he's involved in the receiving game enough?
he's involved enough that I can go there. But I don't, at his price, I don't mind just, going Derrick Henry instead. I like some other ones as well. Even Bijan. I love Kamara.
I think I like Henry in this spot. I think he's not going to
Henry
be
at
played
home.
as much as he is in last couple weeks with Denver looking better, but
Yeah,
he's in a
I
good
agree.
spot.
Let's
So
go
we
lock
still
that.
need a wide receiver, a flex, and a defense.
Yep. Let's go lock in that defense. So defenses, if we're gonna save, the Rams are my cheapest one, but obviously we don't want to play a defense with the ones that we're stacking.
My alternative, I'm not going to say we go this route, but for the listeners, if you are of the mindset that the Panthers-Saints game, we're just going to see both those teams collapse, then they are the second cheapest defense that you can afford, and they're only at 3,100. So an option if you really need it, the cut-in to get the other stars in your lineup, but also risky if Carr's back and we see that offense function again.
How about the Raiders? No T. Higgins. I like the Raiders.
Yeah,
Just go
let's
as cheap as we can.
If
All
they
right.
get us their 5 or 6 points, they did their job.
I'm going to throw my favorite running back out there since we are on FanDuel, and I'd prefer a running back in the flex. It's going to let us save some money, and that's going to be Austin Eckler at 5,500. You could talk me into Mostert or Devin Singletary as well.
I think I would be most excited for Eckler in that spot.
Let's go Eckler. 5,500 is very cheap for him. All right, now we've got 7,400 at wide receiver, which is a respectable wide receiver. Who do you like? You got some favorites? Olave? We're going into that Carolina game.
I could go Reed. Brian Thomas Jr.'s injury scares me at that price.
Yeah, I don't think he'll play.
I don't think he's playing either. Really, it is Olave standing out, but I just don't really see him paying off that value. These mid, kind of that next tier of wide receiver has been hard for me to nail down. Do you have anyone that stands out?
Well, we don't have to spend all of our money. We could definitely go lower, and then it's very odd, but I actually like Jalen Waddle this week.
What is his price point?
It's 6,200.
What if we go 62 for Waddle, and then
Pay
could
up.
we see if there's a better defense that we like a little bit better than the Raiders?
Yep. Now we're at 4,200. We can afford a lot now. We can afford the Chargers. We could get the Chargers. Yeah.
I'd be
Did
good
you
with
like
the
that one?
Chargers. Winston loves throwing pick sixes. It's kind of his calling card, and then coming back and getting touchdowns on the other side. So hopefully we can get one of those.
So we have Stafford for a quarterback, Kenneth Walker III for a running back, Derrick Henry for a running back that we paid up for, Puka Nacua for a wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr. for a wide receiver, Jalen Waddle for a wide receiver, TJ Hawkinson for a tight end, Austin Eckler for our flex position, and then the LA Chargers for our defense.
That'd
Feel
do
good
it.
with this?
I like parts of it. I'll be making some variations as well. So I'll be getting rid of Kenneth Walker.
I like those games. I think the running back that's been showing up for me the most is Aaron Jones. And I'm excited to play him. So he'll probably be sneaking into those lineups as well.
All right. We'll save this and see how it does.
And with that, that wraps up our Week 9 DFS episode. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you have lots of treats and no tricks for your picks for this weekend. We've got our free contest. Links are in the description. We'd love to have y'all join us. And good luck. Happy football watching.
Happy Halloween.